Welcome to this tutorial. My name is Xander. Now this tutorial is part of our Express.js Prisma ORM Query Fundamentals course. You can access this course playlist available for free on YouTube. For deeper learning, the full course is available for purchase at Udemy. Find all the resources and links in this video's description. Now don't forget to subscribe to the channel for weekly promotions, discounts, and Udemy course giveaways. Now that we've seen the database design in the previous tutorial, we have everything now set for us to start building our database. So back into our code, if you remember when we actually created the containers originally, in our Docker Compose, that would then work through a process of initializing our project, and it also initialized Prisma. And in that process, what happened was a new folder was created, this Prisma folder. And inside of here, we have the schema file. So this is where we're going to define all of our tables, our fields, our relationships that make up our tables that we want to create in our database. Right, so here in the schema Prisma file in our project that's been automatically created for us, this is where we're going to define our database schema, our design, using Prisma's schema language. And that's essentially what we are learning in this module, how to define a database here using Prisma's schema language. Now, once this is set up and we use it to actually build our tables, that's not the end of this schema. Here, Prisma, an ORM, an object relational mapping system, this schema will serve as a blueprint for our database, telling Prisma how to interact with our database and how to perform the operations that we're going to tell it to perform. So how to create data, how to read, how to update, and how to delete data effectively. So this schema is core to everything we do when we work with Prisma. Now, if we take a look at the Prisma file, there are already some statements already defined here in the schema file. First of all is the generator client. So this specifies that you want Prisma to generate the Prisma client for JavaScript or TypeScript, since the client works for both. Now, the Prisma client JS that's defined here, this is the default and most common client used when working with Prisma in JavaScript and TypeScript applications. So when you run the command npx prisma generate, Prisma will generate a client library in your project, which will allow you to interact with your database using the models we've defined here within our Prisma schema. Right, so we can discuss more about that later on in this course. So here we have now the data source DB. So here we're simply telling Prisma that we want to use a PostgreSQL database, that's the provider. And we also then tell Prisma where to find this database. So in the env file here, it has automatically created our connection script to the Postgres database. So that's the script, or that's the line of code that's needed to connect to the database. So that is picked up by schema via this env database URL. And that's how Prisma knows what database and how to connect to the database. If you do choose to use any other database, then you simply need to change the provider to MySQL or Oracle, whatever database you want to interact with from your Prisma application. Right, okay, so that's the basics. We can now start building our Prisma schema. So we're going to start off with defining the database tables. So there are 8 tables that we need to build. Here they are. So I've specified the correct names. So do make sure that we use underscores to define the names of any of our tables that have double names. And let's make sure that we use lowercase to define our names and our fields. That just makes sure that everything is consistent. When we start to actually build queries, we know that we don't need to worry about remembering whether names are uppercase or lowercase. Everything is going to be lowercase. Okay, so we have the generator block, we have a data source block. So now we need to create some blocks which will define models, tables that we want to build in our database. All right, so let's get started by using the keyword model. So we're going to define this model block or a new table, and then let's give this a name. So we're going to use a capital here. We're going to use a camel case. So if it's two names, the next name will be, the first letter of the next name will be in capitals. Right, so that's our model category. So this is going to be the category table. Now, if we were to create this now in the database name would have a capital, and that isn't ideal. So what we can do here is we can use the map tool. So at map, and then we can define the actual name we want to use in the database. So this is going to be the actual name for our table, and that's going to be category. So that's how we're going to define a table. Now, where are we? We do have 7 other tables, so we just need to go ahead and create a separate table for each of the tables that we've defined here. Okay, so I've gone ahead and created a new block for each of the new models that we're going to create. So product promotion event, stock management, user, order, and order product. Okay, so we've now defined all the database tables that we're going to create in our database. Now I'm going to stop here because in the next module, I'm going to show you how to run migrations with Prisma. So we're going to take our models here and actually turn them into database tables in our database. So you might be wondering, that's a little bit early to start thinking about actually building tables, considering we don't have any fields yet inside the tables. So particularly if you are new to building databases, there's a lot of information here, and it's a lot easier to build this in small steps than to try and build a large chunk of information, relationships, and so on, and then find you've created a complete mess. And because you don't have much experience building database tables, you find that you take all day, all week to try and solve the problem, which was something simple, like you've incorrectly created a relationship between two tables. So we can follow the rules like if we were building an application, and that is to make sure that we test early and test often, because it's a whole lot easier to work out problems now at this early stages than once we've created all the tables, all the relationships.